I want to thank all of you for coming for us. This is an important occasion. I especially thank Mayor Gray. I thank our two veterans, Herbert Tillery, who was a career soldier, James Rimensnyder, a West Point graduate, and I thank Kimberly Perry, the executive director of DC Vote, for joining us this morning. We will hear from them all shortly. I came to Congress finding District of Columbia residents serving all over the world. But since I have been a member, there have been 3 votes on whether to go to war. Votes on Kuwait, votes on Iraq, and votes on Afghanistan. The taxes of District of Columbia residents help pay for those wars. DC residents fought in those wars, and I have gone to Arlington Cemetery to comfort bereaved families of the sons and daughters of the district who were lost in those wars. The tragic irony is that the district's members of the armed forces, those who died, those who came home, did something very important in this world. They secured the vote for the citizens of Kuwait, Afghanistan, and Iraq. But they came as they went, with no vote of their own on the war or on any other matter. Surely we all remember the purple fingers of the Iraqis who were able to cast a vote for their legislature, who were able to have a vote represented in their legislature for them. And I will never forget that there were Iraqis living in the nation's capital who had the right to vote in the Iraqi election, while our residents who had gone to secure that vote for them still had no vote. In Afghanistan, we have continued to guarantee the vote for those citizens without having the vote ourselves. Now, there are countless times when we have drawn this tragedy, this outrage, the outrage of not having a vote, of not having statehood, to the attention of the Congress. But more than all of those times, more than at other times, the call to war is a time when DC must be heard concerning this distinctive inequality. Our service in war, our taxes to fund war, where our residents put their lives on the line, are in a unique category among offenses to our democratic values. In matters of war, our continuing inequality, as residents of the nation's capital, no less, stands out starkly, even as we make strides toward eliminating other forms of inequality. The budget autonomy referendum that is still undisturbed by Congress. The legislative language for budget autonomy as requested by the president that is currently in the Senate Appropriations Bill, the law that now requires that the D.C. flag be flown in military ceremonies when the flags of the 50 states are flown. The statue of Frederick Douglass, the first to represent the district in the Capitol alongside the statues of the 50 states, and even the new law that kept this D.C. War Memorial from being commandeered to memorialize other soldiers. Even so, going to war yet again without a vote drives home how far we still have to go and must summon us to greater militancy to demand our rights as American citizens. The outcry that the president not strike Syria without a vote from the Congress spotlights intensely the denial of democratic rights that our citizens have faced in every war the nation has fought, except, ironically, the Revolutionary War. Like other members of Congress, I too called on the president to come to Congress before striking Syria. Yet, if there is a vote, D.C. residents will have no vote in the House, no vote in the Senate. If the vote fails and the president proceeds anyway, the citizens of the 50 states and the members of the House and the members of the Senate will have just a taste of what the residents of this city have experienced for more than 2 centuries. For us, it is taxation without representation every single time there is a vote in the House of Representatives. Every single time there is a vote in the Senate, but no vote in the district, for the district. For us, the slogan of the Revolutionary War now has perverse meaning. Give your country your money and prepare to give your life, but do not expect to have a say on either. That, my friends, is a terse summary of tyranny. Today, we join those who say a vote in Congress is necessary to legitimize the war. But there can be no legitimate vote unless all who pay taxes to fund the war are counted. We come today to try to assure that the debate soon to begin in the halls of the House and the Senate will be remembered for more than the red line that was crossed or the deep division in the Congress on a strike on Syria. We want this debate also to be remembered as the last time in our history that our country went to war without a vote cast in the name of every American who pays taxes, finally fulfilling that old war slogan, no taxation without representation, that led the founders to establish the United States of America. I thank you for coming and standing up for your city. Mayor Gray has always not only stood with us, but has exercised leadership on statehood and on the vote ever since becoming mayor. I invite Mayor Gray to come to the podium now.
Thank you very much, Congresswoman Norton, and let me say good morning to everyone. I want to thank Congresswoman Norton for bringing us all together to once again highlight an injustice that has once again been inflicted on the 632,000 people, the residents of the District of Columbia. It's an injustice that we talked about right here just a few weeks ago as we came together to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington. We had some estimated 5,000 people who came together here at this war memorial to speak out against the denial of voting representation and, of course, full democracy for the people, the taxpayers, if you will, of the District of Columbia. Since the first Arab Spring protests in December 2010 in the Arab world, tens of millions of people have been directly affected by upheaval, by violence, the ousting of leaders, and of course interventions by military and police power. Like people of conscience around the world, it is absolutely unbearable for Washingtonians to watch the pain, the suffering, and loss that comes in the midst of the brutal civil war now so much afoot in Syria. At this stage, I certainly can only offer my compassion, my prayers, and my hope for a peaceful solution to come about in Syria. I think we all know that our own country fought a civil war of independence, a war that was about the right of a government that would allow free and fair debate among representatives of its people to determine the laws, the policies, and the actions, that all of those things would be a reality for all Americans. And as an American, I expect the same thing. In fact, I demand that the same thing be available to the elected leaders to be able to participate in those debates. Right now, as you heard from Congresswoman Norton, there is a debate, and you all know, a great debate occurring in the halls of Congress over the United States proposed response to a conflict halfway around the world. The people's representatives must decide whether to give the president authority to act in Syria to begin to right what most accounts would conclude, I think, appears to be a horrific wrong that is taking place. I think we all know that those discussions are exceedingly difficult, and the vote that members of Congress will have to cast will be among the most difficult decisions that they will have to make. Of course, I'm acutely aware that the representatives of only most, not all, only most, and not all Americans will have the opportunity to be on the record as expressing a view about what this nation should do. Many members of the armed forces call the District of Columbia home. We all know that. And our residents care as deeply, in some cases maybe even more deeply, about the outcome of those congressional debates. And of course, the president's resulting action on the outcome of the situation. Forgive me, I have a terrible cold. Unfortunately, unlike other Americans, we have no say in the final outcome of this decision. In the coming weeks, Congress will have many debates. Debates about the debt ceiling, about sequestration, and those of you who follow this know that we are deeply affected now, maybe more so than most, by sequestration. We'll have debates about government spending and the continuing debate about affordable health care in this nation. Now, Congresswoman Norton has always participated in these debates, and she does it with eloquence and extraordinary intellect. However, when the moment of truth comes, and that is the ability of those representatives who are there in the House and those in the Senate to cast a vote, she has to sit idly by without the opportunity to represent the views of 632,000 people who live in the District of Columbia. 632,000 people, now representing a larger population than the state of Vermont, a larger population in the state of Wyoming, a population that is growing by 1,100 to 1,200 people a month, and will probably in the next few years eclipse the population of other states. It is unconscionable, ladies and gentlemen. It is an outrage that we have a representative who cannot weigh in on the outcome of a decision as important as this is to the United States of America, and all the other important decisions that are made about how this country comports itself. How can we raise our hand in the Pledge of Allegiance, and we all do it dutifully, how can we raise our hand and say those words, liberty and justice for all, when in fact we don't have liberty and we don't have justice for the 632,000 people who live in this city? And frankly, whatever the outcome of this may be, if we go to Syria and get involved in some form of fashion, or we don't, how can we ignore the reality that while we fight for and speak out eloquently and forcefully about the rights of democracy of others, we don't even fight the battle on behalf of our own people in our own nation's capital? It is unconscionable, ladies and gentlemen. I will not stop talking about this, and everybody who lives in the District of Columbia should stand up and speak out on this atrocity that we continue to experience in the United States of America every day in our own nation's capital, the District of Columbia. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Mayor Gray. Behind us is a memorial on which are engraved the names of almost 500 members of the military who gave their lives without a vote during World War I. It is only appropriate to hear now from two veterans of more recent wars. I see Statehood Senator Michael Brown here, and I thank him for being here. These two men took the greatest risk any American can take for their country, and they did it as volunteers, as a part of the volunteer army. First, I'm going to ask the career soldier, Herb Tillery, who has not stopped serving, because he serves now as executive director of the College Success Foundation, which is helping so many young people in the District of Columbia to get a college education. Herb was raised in the district. He went into the U.S. Army as a second lieutenant in 1970, but he served with distinction for 26 years, retiring in the rank of colonel. He served in Korea. He served in Germany. He was a battalion commander. He served in the Gulf War. Herb Tillery's son is also now serving in the United States Army. And his son has had 3 back-to-back tours in Iraq. That is the nature of the service that members of the armed forces from the District of Columbia have rendered for more than 2 centuries. I'm proud to introduce Herb Tillery now for remarks.
Thank you, Congresswoman Norton. I, too, thank the Congresswoman for having us all here today to, again, bring attention to this atrocity here in the city of Washington, D.C. As has been stated many times, D.C. residents have continually been denied a vote in Congress. But that injustice is most striking at times like this, when representatives of people living in every other part of this country are given the opportunity to weigh in on the issue of the use of military force. The district is home to tens of thousands of proud veterans and active members of the armed services who have volunteered to defend democracy. We have always stepped up when our nation was in need. As a veteran and the father of a service member, I am personally aware of the enormous stakes of putting our sons and daughters in harm's way. As an American and as a veteran who grew up and now resides in the District of Columbia, I am saddened, appalled, and borderline outraged over being shut out of the congressional debate over the use of the military force in Syria. I'm a 27-year veteran of the United States Army and ended my career shortly before a likely promotion to Brigadier General when I was asked to return to my hometown to assist in the transformation of the D.C. public school system back in 1996. I'm also a veteran of Desert Shield, Desert Storm, where I served as a battalion commander and concurrently served as a provisional brigade commander, responsible for over 1,500 soldiers and their families stationed in United States Army Europe during the period August 1989 through July 1991. I also have a son who is currently serving in the United States Army. His service began on October 1, 2001, within 30 days of the bombing of the Twin Towers in New York. During this time, he has served 3 back-to-back combat tours in Iraq with the 4th Infantry Division out of Fort Hood, Texas, and is currently stationed in Grafenwehr, Germany. My son and I are only 2 of 37,000 D.C. veteran residents who willingly and voluntarily serve our country, knowing full well the dangers and sacrifices that lay ahead by doing so. Each veteran and active duty service member has a very personal story that relates to responding to the call to serve. But at the cornerstone of every story is the commitment to the value of democracy. As troops are drawing down in our armed services, and as we've seen in this very tumultuous and ambiguous time in our world, we are seeing global citizens literally dying for the chance to participate in a democratic process. The United States is quite possibly the world's ambassador on the value of democracy. Yet, the fact of the matter is that over 600,000 D.C. residents, including those who have served this country to protect democracy, freedom, and their right to representation in their governments on our shores and abroad, are denied those very principles that are the cornerstone to our American identity. That is a travesty. In fact, we have prominent members of Congress who extol the virtues of democracy for others around the world and are willing to vote to put our troops in harm's way to sacrifice their lives during the protection of the freedom and democracy for others, but turn a blind eye in the support of the 600,000 plus residents and veterans in this very city in which they place the vote, our nation's capital. That also borders on being hypocritical. The residents of the District of Columbia have been denied too long the right to fully participate in our democratic process. We're provided the right to vote for the President of the United States, but we have no representative vote once he or she is in office. It is high time to give the residents of the District of Columbia full representative voting rights in the chambers of Congress. Please do this because it's the right thing to do and not because it is political. Thank you.
Thank you, Herb Tillery. You would think that if Congress wouldn't give us a vote on anything else, they'd give us a vote on whether to go to war. Our next speaker is also a D.C. resident who can't stop serving. James Rimensnyder is a graduate of Wilson High School. Went to the Service Academy at West Point. And after he graduated, and while he was in Iraq, he wrote a letter to the President of the United States as a member of the armed services, asking his commander-in-chief to do all he could to grant the vote to D.C. residents. When James Rimensnyder came home, he joined the D.C. Police Department, where we are very fortunate to enjoy his services now. I ask James Rimensnyder to come to the podium.
Good morning. I'd like to thank the Congressman also for putting this together, also the Mayor, sir, and then the leadership of DC Vote for all that they've done to help educate people about this very serious issue. It's going to be hard for me to top the words of my fellow speakers here, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to share an experience that I had in Iraq that I think does a really good job of illustrating, how crazy it is that we don't have representation here in Congress, here at home, in a democracy that's touted all over the world as the model. I was in Iraq in 2006, and they had just completed elections, one of the first successful elections in Iraq in over 60 years. And all the people in Baghdad were coming out with purple prints on their thumbs because they had to give their thumbs, they had to put their print on their ballot to certify their ballot. And it was a day of great joy for the Iraqi people, also for the American soldiers there, because after 3 years of daily hard combat, Iraqis were finally getting the chance to vote, finally getting the chance to move forward and create a truly working democracy, and finally toss away the yoke of authoritarianism over the era of Saddam Hussein. And I too felt the emotions. I was like, this is great. We really achieved something. My soldiers in my platoon, we worked every day, and it was hard motivating them to keep doing their job, but now they could see the fruits of their labor. The Iraqis had the right to vote. They were going to the polls. It was peaceful, and they were erecting their new government. But then I also got thinking. I got thinking about the 8 soldiers in my company who had already given their lives to make this happen. And I started thinking about where I fit in. And I started thinking about, here are 8 American soldiers who gave their lives for a right that the Iraqis now have, yet Americans, DC residents, don't have back at home. So it was a little bittersweet day for me that day. A couple weeks later, I was at a meeting with some Iraqi leadership. About every week I would meet with my Iraqi counterparts, and we would talk about what's happened over the past week. As is common in Iraqi culture, you spend about an hour talking about other stuff before you get to the actual business you need to take care of. And one of the first conversations we had was about the elections. And we both agreed that it was a momentous occasion, And then we started talking, and somehow the conversation led into D.C. and how in our democracy, residents in the capital city, unlike Baghdad, under their new government, don't have the right to vote. And I remember his eyes just wide open, popped open, and looked at me and said, really, that's crazy. And the only thing I could say is, sir, I agree with you. But then, I sort of turned it around and I said, well, that's, tried to explain it somehow. And the only thing I could come up with is it's not perfect. No democracy is. Ours isn't. As you can see, I don't have the right to vote in my own capital city where I live, where I spent my entire life. You guys just voted, but you have a lot of issues to work out. The important thing is democracies evolve. So you need to continue to improve yours. We obviously have some work to do on our end as well. So I think we have that opportunity. I think we need to use situations like what's going on in Syria to really let people know that it is hypocritical, to put it in the words of my colleagues. And if we want to be that shining beacon to other democracies, if we want to tell people like Assad, people in North Korea, any other places with, autocracies, then we need to fix what's going on here at home first. So once again, I'd like to thank everybody for coming, and I'd like to thank Congresswoman Norton for inviting me to speak.
Thank you very much, James. There's nothing like hearing from a D.C. veteran. And I thank you, James, also for your service on the Service Academy Board. Finally, we are very pleased to have the Executive Director of D.C. Vote, the organization that carries the flag constantly for our rights. And I'm pleased to welcome to the podium now Kimberly Perry.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman Norton, for having this press conference. This is so important for us to get this message out. You all agree with me by now that among the most admirable Americans are the ones who believe so deeply in democracy, as you've just heard, that these individuals are willing to leave their families, their children, their communities here in the District of Columbia to go out and fight for democracy abroad. They volunteer for this mission that they might not even fully understand, a mission that likely began with a debate just like the one that's going on right now, and they never had equal opportunity to weigh in on, like every other American that they might find themselves serving next to, fighting next to. Nearly 40,000 sons and daughters of D.C. families have always stepped up to defend democracy around the world. It's a national outrage that these proud, proud Americans have no say in the debate over our involvement in Syria or any other armed conflict. We actually can't sit around and be comfortable with this reality. We can't be comfortable with this glaring flaw in our democracy that stares us in the face every single time we go to debate or send our neighbors into harm's way to protect our democratic principles. It's time for us to stand tall for all of our soldiers who so willingly stand for us. It's time for us to show them that their service has not gone unnoticed. I call on every single person who hears our plea today to stand with us, stand for us, stand for exactly what's right, what's the right thing to do. We encourage you all to contribute your time and your voice at dcvote.org and stand alongside thousands of others when you get involved. If you live outside of the District of Columbia, we need you. We need you to call your members of Congress, demand that they stand up for D.C. by supporting efforts that grant D.C.'s military families an equal voice in debates about war and about the peace they so deserve. Please, let's not let one other important national decision take place in this country without the voice, without the vote of our dedicated citizens here in the District of Columbia. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Kimberly. Are there any questions from the press for any of the veterans or any of us who've spoken? Thank you very, yes.
Congressman, if you could talk about if you did have the vote, can you describe what your thinking is on the Syrian situation right now? Would you authorize
With what I know now, if I had the vote, I could not vote for members. I could not vote for a strike on Syria. Now, I have been briefed about. I've had one briefing. There are going to be other briefings, and the first of them are today. I raised questions when we were briefed by 5 members of the administration that were not satisfactorily answered. It appears that we're going to war to punish Assad. And I should say that I do believe that chemical weapons are different from other weapons. So I am not with those who say you didn't go into other places. So what's the difference? Chemical weapons have a special treaty, just as nuclear weapons have a special treaty. And I don't want to trivialize that. The unknowns here are horrendous. I don't know if you saw this morning the interview with Assad. Now, you'd expect him to boast, but he certainly did, that he would in fact respond. There were not, frankly, good answers. Perhaps they couldn't give them because of security, but they were not good answers to the question of what happens when there's a response. You can't expect to hit somebody, and they just sit there and take it. Terribly worried about the most volatile region in the United States, the Mideast. Very worried about whether the emphasis on a targeted, limited strike would do any good. He has 100 tons of chemical weapons. I have no doubt, and I have not met a member who like me has any doubt that chemical weapons were used. There is massive evidence, but there are huge unknowns. If, as the papers report, they are winning the war, why do they let loose a massive chemical weapon strike now? We have almost no intelligence from Iraq, as you might expect. That just didn't add up. Are they trying to do that to kind of wound up the war? Does it mean that he's been weakened or strengthened? It may be that in the coming days they will have some clarification, but I think that the administration has a very long way to go to convince members of the Senate or the House. And I just hope that the president can find a way to use the threat to engage in diplomacy. I am extremely worried that we are alone, essentially. Even the French have said, wait until we see what the inspectors have to say. As long as we're waiting, I don't know why we're not waiting until then. And I've just given you a kind of stream of consciousness about the many, many issues for me before, at the moment, if they said, Eleanor, you can vote, and today you can vote, I'd have to vote no.
Do you think there's insufficient evidence to show that the Syrian regime used still
No, I just said I think there is sufficient evidence. That's why there is sufficient evidence in my judgment to show that the regime used the weapons. They have eyewitness eyewitness testimony from the first responders. All of the weapons came from Assad's side to the other side. And that is the dilemma. I must tell you that there have been chemical weapons used before, but they have been rarely used. So the fact that the president steps up now and says they must be used, he ought to, and maybe this is the time that something has to be done. I think that the great dilemma for the president, now that he sees that he could lose this vote, frankly, in the Senate and the House, is to find a way to use the threat to, in fact, get to the world community so that we can take a next step and not look as if we really just couldn't hack it, and therefore there's nothing that can be done. Something has to be done. I certainly am not convinced that what has to be done is a strike on Syria, and that having struck, we would have had an effect of the kind we want. I think we don't have any idea what kind of effect we would have. And that bothers me, that we may be opening another wide war in the Mideast.
Would you offer your insight on how you expect this to play out on the Hill this week? There's some suggestion that perhaps the House won't even vote on this resolution.
Typically, the House of Representatives does not put a matter on the floor unless that matter will prevail. Now, it's very important that the Speaker of the House and the Majority Leader are both for the strike. But they have had the embarrassment of putting things on the floor where they should have had the votes and they didn't, like the Farm Bill most recently. I don't think they will put this vote on the floor unless they can count votes. And you must also remember, and I don't know whether this will be the case, but the leaders say that this is a conscience vote. If it's a conscience vote and there's no pressure put on members, then I don't know how in the world the vote will come, especially since from home people appear to be hearing they don't want a strike on Syria. The president has got to find his way out of this. He found his way in it. He's a smart man. He's got to find his way out of it. And I don't think the way out of it is a strike on Syria.
Congressman, last week, some outlets in the conservative media had seized on a comment that you made that said that one of the few reasons to vote for him would be to spare the president embarrassment and humiliation. Do you want to comment on that?
No, I didn't say that's a reason to vote for it. I would say, if I'm searching for reasons why any Democrat would vote for it, maybe they would say, Lord, the president is out here on his own, maybe we should back him up. I mean, typically that's what happens. What's unusual here is people don't seem to be backing the president up. I certainly didn't say that's a reason to vote for it. I thought that would say to people, therefore, I don't think he has the vote. Because I don't think people will do that if the people back home are telling them you better not vote for this war. Thank you very much.